Just a quick introduction for those of you who don't know me. My name's Eileen Rowden, one of the co-founders of both PMO Learning, but also House of PMO for professional PMO people. Um, and in terms of my background, like you'll find all of our trainers, I always say I had a proper job. I worked around project and program management, predominantly in various different PMOs in different organizations for a good 17 years before I eventually jumped ship and came to the other side of the table. So now spend my time both training and helping other organizations improve project program delivery. So some of you might know me as the lead author of the the PMO competency framework, but also the P3O, the best management practice. Um, One of the reasons we set up PMO Learning is because we were very concerned that a lot of PMO people were being shortchanged. There was lots of courses for project and program managers, but we knew that the growing army of PMO professionals really needed a little bit more focused support. So we set up PMO Learning with the intention of providing a whole range of certification for people who are working in PMOs. We wanted to also make sure that what we were delivering was actually kind of high quality training. So we make absolutely sure that all of our courses are not just kind of a listen and learn session. They're actually kind of highly interactive with lots of exercises, lots of conversations. Because although we're very keen on people passing their exams, and who wouldn't be, what we also want to make sure is that people know how to apply that in practice when they're in their workplace. So that was very important for us. So that's essentially what we've done. And I think the other thing that Lindsay and I did as we set up the business was make sure that the people who actually delivered our training actually not just kind of understood the theory and knew the implications of that, but had actually lived some of that theory in a classroom, in a workplace. So you'll find that all of our trainers, in fact, not only used to work in a PMO, actually still currently work in a PMO. So we've got a number of our trainers who are either contractors or even permanent employees who've got permission to do some training alongside that. And so you'll be able to have real conversations about, kind of what the challenges they find on a day-to-day basis in their PMO. So I do think that that also helps in terms of the credibility of the people delivering the training, but it also means you can have some real conversations. And because we try really hard for the courses to be interactive, then you also have the opportunity to speak to other people on the course and the other delegates. So as you'll see, this is a webinar that we do. We never set them up so everybody's muted and they can't join in. We leave the chat open. You can have private conversations in there. You can have conversations with us. And we really like to get all of the delegates involved, which does mean it's been interesting as we've kind of gone through COVID, how people are used to kind of sitting in their little kind of bubble with their headphones on and kind of being observers potentially for a lot of the things that are happening online. We really kind of go for that interactive approach, but I'll cover a little bit more of that later. So the idea is we're just going to give you an overview of what's in the P3G practitioner course, how it's delivered. And I am just going to take a little section from the course and show you the level of detail and some of the conversations we might have. So you are going to have to behave as delegates, hopefully, as we kind of go through this taster session. So, I mean, in terms of this certification, from a PMO learning perspective, we very much kind of aim this at PMO people. So the course actually is aimed at a kind of wider set of potential delegates, right from people who are going on the main board and their subcommittees, people who actually want to understand how governance works in their organisations, project and programme managers who are obviously going to be executing the projects and programmes, PMOs, because that's us, and why we want to have this certification in our portfolio. Anybody of the management teams, anybody who has overall accountability for projects and programs in their organization, excuse me, and not just delivery of those projects and programs, but actually of the people who are involved in delivering of the benefits of those programs once they're back into business as usual, which is something we're going to touch on again today. And then anybody who's involved from an assurance, governance and assurance often sit very much hand in hand. So open to a wide range of individuals as we're delivering from PMO Learning. Our focus on our conversations primarily are looking at kind of, we'll cover the syllabus to get through the exams, but we'll also have some kind of more detailed conversations on what the implications are for the PMO. So just a quick one, and I know I do this every session, but I do think it's kind of worth reiterating it. When we're delivering training, it's not like sitting at a university lecture. We're not kind of sitting there with a whole kind of band of people out in the audience there. We very much try to replicate the classroom environment. So we limit the number of delegates on a course to 12 to make sure that the trainer can have conversations with anybody and everybody on the course. It also means that as the trainer, you can make sure that everybody has had the opportunity and you can assess whether they're really engaging with the content or whether they're struggling with certain aspects of it. So we do have a limit of 12 per course. Now, because of the way we've kind of set that up, it is really important that each of the delegates kind of recognise what being in a physical classroom means. So we do ask people to put their cameras on, and see today, I'm glad, kind of nice to see Jenny and Mike with their cameras on. A few, you see, we get to wave and interact and everything. And I realize it's a webinar, so you might want to choose. So, but when we're in the classroom environment, we do ask people to have their cameras on because, again, as a trainer, it's really important to be able to kind of observe some of that kind of non-verbal language that we see, just to kind of make sure people are with it. But also, it's much more kind of interactive, just in terms of checking that we're all still engaged with the course. And because we're all on our laptops and we're PCs as we're doing the course, it appears to be quite easy just to kind of, well, I just do a couple of kind of emails. Oh, look, there's a message that's just come up. And we do try hard to say, well, actually try to shut those windows down, try and focus on the course, because then you get more out of it. You'll also then get more out of the trainer because they'll be able to kind of know exactly what the areas you need to be addressed, and we'll have much better conversations about the course content. Every kind of step in the way, as we go through the training, we have exercises. Now, some of those exercises can be just in chat, but we do use some kind of other technology as well to support us in the training. At the minute, we still deliver all of our training over Zoom. We recognise that Teams technology is getting to kind of offer almost all the same functionality as Zoom did when Zoom's been out, but we're still sticking with Zoom at the minute. We use it as we do with this webinar for video and audio. We'll usually put kind of PowerPoint presentations and slides up there, but we do use the chat facility. And thanks, Mike, he's kind of said hello in the chat, as has Ross and Jenny. So again, if you've not got your chat open, please do that. And because we've got hopefully kind of a group of 12 on the course and we want to get a bit more involved in the exercises, we do use the breakout rooms to allow people to kind of go and work in smaller groups and have more kind of more detailed conversations in those groups. And we'll also use polls. We do use some other technology, Mentimeter, Miro and Trello for exercises. So we use these for whiteboards and drag and drop and kind of scribbling notes, exactly as we would. They're equivalent to our flip charts. And the important thing for our delegates is that none of them incur any additional costs when you're attending our training. So when you get your joining instructions, you'll have all of the links and ways to kind of register for the various technologies. And we can kind of help you if you've got any problems prior to starting on the course. So that's the background. Let's have a quick look at kind of what's involved in the course. And I've started putting this in as well because people are quite interested in terms of, well, who are these kind of mythical trainers, Aileen, that you've got kind of delivering the course? And for the P3G certification, we've got two practitioners and accredited trainers. So myself, I'm an accredited trainer for this particular course, and we also have Garrett Began, who's a highly experienced PMO manager, and also a project program and portfolio management consultant. Now, I met Garrett a long time ago. He worked with me when I was at Cadbury Schweppes implementing a P3M tool globally and the associated processes. So I've seen his work firsthand in the PMO, so he comes highly recommended. So when you turn him on a course, you'd get either Garrett or myself delivering. So you can find Garrett on LinkedIn. He's more than happy to kind of join it with people. And again, Garrett is he's currently in kind of contract with a client, but he has time set aside to deliver the training courses. So again, he can talk about some kind of real life experiences and some challenges around establishing good governance around project and program management. Not just talk about some of the problems, but some of the tactics to overcome some of those challenges. In terms of the actual kind of course itself, it's a 2-day course. So we've got them scheduled in the diary. So it's a 2-day course. It's a full course for those 2 days. And over those 2 days, what we'll do is we'll take you through the textbook, which you'll see on the left-hand side. And Ross is very quietly sitting in the audience. So if you've kind of spotted Ross in the attendees of today, so you can ask him a question. He's going to love me for that. But feel free to kind of use the chat if you want. Oh, good. Yeah, brilliant. Jenny's got the book. So thumbs up, Jenny, for already having the book. It is, there he is. Thank you, Ross, just for showing your face. And I have to say, the book recommend the book. You know, even if we didn't do the course, I still absolutely love the book. Loads of good content in there and loads of good reference material. So even when you've done the course, you can kind of go back and use that in your organizations. The exam, there is an exam. It's not done on the final day, so those days have gone of doing exams at the kind of the end of the course. So you will get a voucher to do the exam, which you can sit at your own convenience. The exam is provided by P3G Qualifications Authority, which has been set up. So they'll organise all your exam. We'll send you all of the details in your voucher. The exam is a 90-minute exam in which you've got to do 50 multiple choice questions. So, you know, kind of very kind of standard approach to doing online exams these days. So again, when you join the course, we'll send you all of the details of how to book your exam and get that sorted. Pass mark is 50%, and it is a closed book exam. So before doing the course, they will double check that your desks are empty and that you can remember what we're talking about. Oh, he's just corrected me. It's an open book exam. My apologies. Yes, so it's an open book exam. So you can actually kind of have the material there in front of you while you're actually kind of doing that, which means that a lot of the questions are not just about actually remembering what's in the book, but also in terms of how you actually apply that, which is where I think the kind of the real learning comes. So look, I can do this dynamically as we go. Yes, it is an open book exam. There we go. Thank you, Ross. It's an open book exam in that 90 minutes. Good to know he's on there to kind of keep us straight. So the content we cover off in the 2 days. We have an introduction to P3G and what it is about, what the kind of the key meanings of that are. We talk through what are the benefits of having good governance in the organization over projects and programs. You know, kind of what will make a difference in our organization, which is kind of, you know, there's no point spend all of this kind of time and money trying to put it in place if, you know, it's not going to make a difference. So we'll talk about what those benefits are. And then there are 10 principles. We'll cover 7 off on the first day, and then we'll do the remaining principles on the second day. And then 2 kind of really important sections, I think, particularly in the implementation of P3G. So how is it? How are we going to implement this in our organization. So there's lots of different ways we can kind of do that, lots of ways to apply it. And this is where I think having some kind of real conversation, the textbook's great and gives you those guidelines, but having a conversation about, well, what does that really mean? And what happens if this happens? And well, does this not have any problems over here? So having some real conversation and dealing with some of the issues that you might have in your organization, I think is where there's kind of that kind of additional value of kind of going on the course on a face-to-face course with a tutor rather than just kind of reading the book. We'll also then talk about kind of how we develop P3G maturity as we establish that and embed it in the organisation. And then the final session we go through, the trainers will actually just make sure that you're comfortable, that you know how to apply what you've learned in your organisation. So again, all of the kind of the different flavours of that. So 2 full days. We always say that after day one, the chances are you're going to have some homework, and I know that you will. And typically what we'll do is at the end of day one, we'll give you a series of additional questions that you can practice. You can practice that night, and we'll go through them the next morning. And again, we go through a full kind of series of practice questions. So not only are you learning the theory, but you're also getting some practice. So when you leave the course, you're comfortable that you know what the structure of the questions might be, and that you feel comfortable and confident that you've learned what's needed in order to pass that exam. So this is the great graphic that was created that sits in the book, which it represents the 10 principles. Now, we did a launch a few weeks ago where we kind of touched on each of those 10 principles. But from a taster perspective, what I want to do is just look at this third one. Okay, because I've spent quite a bit of time in my working life actually trying to make this happen in a number of organizations. And it seems, you know, kind of, it's very textbook in terms of the business outcome accountability determines project or program accountability. But actually, when we kind of think through what that actually means, it becomes a really important to understand what the implications are, what some of the challenges are for the organization, and again, some tactics on how we can overcome those challenges. So, what this principle is saying is that whoever is accountable for making sure that the business achieves a particular KPI or a particular metric or a particular target has to be the same person who actually is owning the project or program that's going to make a difference to those metrics or those KPIs or those targets. Okay. And if we haven't got that interests of the business or the interest of that particular part of the business at the heart of project and program decision making, then potentially the organization is going to be making suboptimal decisions about what's in that project and how that project progresses, delivers into the organization. So that's what the principle is about, which kind of just then kind of leads us on to start thinking about, well, what does that mean? And so from a business accountability, let's just think about real kind of people and positions in the organization. So if we're implementing a new sales application, it's typically going to be the sales manager or the sales director who is saying, we want to do that because we need to have better understanding who our customer bases are. We want to do better analysis of who buys and who sells in the basket, how we can do that. If we're putting a new warehouse together, again, it might be the logistics manager who says, we need some new technology, we need automatic picking in the warehouse. This will, kind of vastly improve the speed at which we can get our products out to our customers. So sales director, logistics director or manager, they're very clear from their business accountabilities. They will have metrics and measures. So sales manager, obviously looking at kind of the sales revenues, profit revenues, upselling some metrics around that. The logistics manager will be targeted on how, kind of how much stock we keep in the warehouse, the refill rate, how quick we can get that out to our customers. So they're going to be asking for improvements to their systems, their processes, their infrastructure that helps them do their job. And where there are projects and programs that are required, it would seem right that they would have that accountability. If they have accountability over those projects and programs, then it becomes absolutely clear that they will also have accountability for the business case. And again, we'll come back to some of the challenges with that. And then within that business case accountability, which is used as justification to get the budget and the investment, that they also then own the investment and that responsibility, that accountability of how that money is going to be spent in the organization. So really interesting. What you've now got then is that kind of direct link between how much has been invested and being able to hold somebody to account for saying, well, how much did we invest and what difference has it made in the organization? Because that accountable person has a kind of input into what's been invested, but is directly accountable then for what's actually being delivered in the organization. And so this, in order to find out when we allocate sponsors, it's important that we do some kind of investigation into business as usual to make sure they're the right person. Now, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions because this will kind of just kind of get our head around some of the potential challenges for us in the PMO and what our role is. So who gets to decide on who is the project sponsor, the program sponsor in our organizations? Now, I have to say that I've already taken a big leap because in some organizations, we still really struggle to understand the role of the sponsor. And sometimes it's just a figurehead rather than a fully accountable role. Okay, so happy to take any kind of comments on that and we'll have a conversation about that. But who gets to decide on the sponsor in your organization? And feel free, anybody can open up chat and just type in there. Who gets to pick? Anybody think it's their PMO who gets to pick the project sponsor or the program sponsor? Okay, so for some people, it's actually the chief exec who picks up the identifying who the sponsor is. That's one way of making sure that somebody is held to account. Okay, in other organisations, we've got the PMO who makes the suggestion that the sponsor might who the best person, best place to be a sponsor, but they do need to kind of formally agree. Yes, we can't just volunteer them. Yes, we have to make sure that they've accepted that. Okay, so the interesting bit from a PMO perspective, we very rarely and quite happily, I think it's not part of our role to say this person has to be the project or the program sponsor. But from a PMO perspective, we will own the kind of the role description for the sponsor, making sure that we understand how that sits in with the rest of accountabilities for delivery of projects and programs. We also may be involved from a PMO perspective in terms of undertaking the training for those sponsors to make sure they understand their roles and responsibilities. And from a PMO perspective, we may also be involved in coaching and mentoring those sponsors. And I think in a number of organisations, it's been really interesting that we've actually tried to create a PPM forum for sponsors. We often talk about a PPM forum for project and program managers so they can kind of share their knowledge and expertise. And interestingly, actually kind of having in a larger organization is about having an opportunity for project and program sponsors to share their challenges of being a project or program sponsor. And interestingly, about whether they mix with the kind of the project and program managers. And often we kind of run a few sessions for those kind of program and project sponsors so they can find out, from each other, and they don't have to admit to the wider world that they find it a bit of a challenge. So yes, so this kind of as to make sure we've got the right person leading a project or program. I think as Ross has put there in the comments, we can own that process, but also in our role of ensuring that things are being delivered as they should be, we can also raise the flag when we think somebody's actually been given that sponsorship role and perhaps is not the best person to deliver it. So we won't have the chance to kind of say, oh, I'm sorry, Joe, you can't be the sponsor because Ross has to be, but we can certainly raise the flag about how benefits are going to be realised in the organisation, how it's really going to impact change, with a misalignment of project ownership and business ownership. I also think in terms of some of these challenges, very often we have PMOs who are more than comfortable to work within the project and program management community. And there are various roles, and the governance one being one of them, is where we absolutely need to understand how project and program management sits alongside business as usual, how project and program governance sits alongside business as usual governance. And so we should in the PMO have a network and understand the rules in business as usual. And if we don't, then actually trying to implement this principle gives us a good opportunity to go and understand a little bit more about how the business works. So going back to kind of just underpinning the theory, and this is again a broader understanding that we can give the people who work in our organisations and the justification why sponsors should be allocated, appointed with more thought than just kind of who's the person in the room or who's kind of put their hand up to work on a particular project and programme. In that, as an organisation, we only invest in a project or a program because we think there's going to be an improvement in organization outcomes. We're investing in projects and programs to improve our profitability, increase our customers, drive revenues up, expand our business market share. All of those reasons are business operational reasons for improving the organization from the project. And therefore, all of those metrics, all of those measures will have a business owner. And it's always interesting to kind of go and have a look at your corporate metrics and say, how does our organization measure success? Who does it hold accountable for those various metrics in the organization to actually drive success in the organization? And sometimes it's more explicit than others. And as we kind of said in the previous slide, sometimes we need to go and do a little bit of investigation. Does anybody use the balanced scorecard in their organization? It seems to have kind of gone out of fashion. The balanced scorecard looks, as it would indicate, as a balanced set of metrics about kind of 4 different areas in the organization. One about the financial metrics, one about the processes and procedures, one about staff people who work in the organization, and then the 4th element is customers who are obviously external to the organization. And it indicates that we've got a good balance of our organization. We recognize that actually doing things from a financial perspective impacts customers, impacts our own internal staff, and we need to have efficient processes to work. And in a balanced scorecard organization, it becomes quite easy because each individual metric within that has a named individual. The other way you might be able to kind of find these business owners is if you look at your process model. Anybody got detailed process models in their organization? Yes, so with kind of Mike's shaking his head thinking, if only kind of we had that in our organization. But there are a number of organizations where they have process owners and process kind of stakeholders. So you've actually got kind of a route map through all of the processes of the organization. That's often quite useful as well in terms of identifying who the sponsors could be because they're the process owners in those kind of process diagrams. They're also held on a number of systems now as well. So there are lots of different ways to identify them. There is, of course, that good old kind of just go and speak to people. Yes, never to be kind of completely dismissed out of hand. Actually go and having a conversation and be very clear about kind of the specific processes or the specific metrics that are going to be looked after. I think the other thing that's really interesting as well when we go and have these conversations, it also helps us to identify and articulate what the benefits are from the project or program. We often say when we're putting the benefits together that we're really struggling to kind of articulate what those benefits are. And if we've got an understanding of what processes are going to be changed or altered or introduced, understanding kind of who the process owner is, you can go and have those kind of conversations about what specific metrics are actually going to be addressed. Um, and I think this graph kind of really helps us understand what happens. So if you look at the two, I've forgotten the name of them, the two things either side, what they're called, the two axes, that would be the phrase that I'm struggling for. And it's obviously it's been a long week. On the two axes, along the bottom, we've got kind of time, so what happens over a period of time, and on the kind of vertical axes, we've got the business outcome. So how is the business performing? And we would like to think that, you know, kind of the business will continue to perform at a consistent level. And there is a business owner who has accountability for that. But life usually has and performance usually has a half-life that says, you know, after a period of time, our actual kind of performance and our business outcomes goes down for lots of different reasons. You know, the market changes, costs increase, we have competition in there, the kind of the demographics who potentially buy our product or use our product is changing, and technology has changed. And we talk about, you know, people will have heard of the VUCA environment. I'll just kind of put that in the here. If I could type, in that things are happening faster and faster, and the world will continue to change, and we will have to change our products or services to make sure that we're kind of aligned with the new reality that kind of sits out there. So we talk about this kind of VUCA environment, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And if we don't do anything to our products and services as an organization, our business performance will go down. And so what we do, and one of the reasons why we invest in projects is say, well, if we're going to make a change, if we're going to improve our products, if we're going to improve our services, then we are going to invest in a project to do a change. So we might invest in terms of, instead of just delivering our products in a retail store, we're now going to have an online shop where people can buy that online. That would be an investment. And so we would want that person accountable for kind of the sales and the revenue against those products to be the sponsor, agree to the investment. So what we've got now is an increased business outcome level. And that's what we're really aiming for. And I think, you know, kind of it looks really easy when you've kind of got it down there on a picture in terms of kind of why that actually works. But it's what we need to get to is this recognition that the project sponsor who's accountable for the project outcomes is also the same person who is accountable for those big business outcomes. And without that, as we've said, without putting business accountability for a project at the heart of project delivery, we're never really going to get that alignment. I'm going to go back to here in terms of this. What might happen? Anybody got any suggestions if perhaps instead of the sales director sponsoring the project, we might have somebody in the administration function or somebody in another regional office looking after this project? What might they do differently to the business owner when they're determining the scope or investment that needs to be made in this project? Any suggestions about what might happen? It's all gone very quiet. Okay. It may be that they don't fully understand. Absolutely, Jenny. Yes, we've got some different drivers. Yes. Miss Elaine, we're trying to achieve something very slightly different. We might have a different view of the prioritization of the scope that needs to be delivered. It might be very difficult for us to really understand what the benefits are going to be delivered or anticipated to be delivered. And they might be wrongly set, so the benefits might be unachievable or actually be in another part of the organization. And I really love that phrase that Ross has put on there, is they're actually kind of looking at that project through a different lens. Yeah. So potentially, if you think about the different lenses, kind of a fisheye lens kind of completely kind of changes the shape and size what we're looking at. So this kind of keeping this accountability becomes absolutely key. So the other thing we also want to think about is about what are the challenges to not having appropriately skilled and capable sponsors in our organization. I think the other thing, which I've also found in organizations, is that people tend to want the most senior people in the organization to be accountable. And if you kind of take that to its extreme, then the chief exec essentially could be sponsors for everything. Which is kind of a bit madness, but trying to go down to the next level. Anybody struggling in their organization to have capable, available sponsors to work on their projects? Yes, there's a few people. And so again, we could talk if on the course we'll talk in a little bit more detail in terms of what we do, but from a high level kind of picture, if the sponsor lacks authority, we can spend some time making sure that we've got the right roles and responsibilities and getting that role established in the organization, and make sure that as they're appointed as sponsor, people understand what that means. And again, I've worked in a number of organizations where we've actually gone back to job descriptions of senior managers in the organization and said, well, actually, yes, you've got a great operational role for a logistics manager, but actually by the time you get to this level in the organization, we also expect you to be sponsoring projects. And so we've changed business as usual job descriptions to say, yes, you've got an operational role, but you will also be expected to pick up a sponsoring role in that organization. When you get appointed sponsor, you'll be given a role description applicable to the project that you're actually sponsoring. And what that means is when it comes to recognition and reward for our senior managers in the organization, we're not only looking for them to have performed well in their operational business role, what we're also doing is expecting them to have performed well in their sponsoring role, because the last thing we want them to do is kind of invest all of that money in the project and then not do the right things a sponsor needs to do to be able to deliver that benefits and that uplift in business outcomes. So there is a bit about lacking authority. Often we find that they don't have time enough to work on that project or program. And we really need somebody who does that active role. So again, working with an organization, we'd identified somebody in the organization who had 60 projects that they were sponsoring. And we said, well, that's madness, because over a 2-week period, yes, even if they give an hour to each of those projects, that's 60 hours, then they've only got 20 hours left in order for them to do their operational day job. And that becomes kind of really kind of an unmanageable situation. So again, we do talk about saying, have we got the right person in the organization to take accountability? Have we gone kind of too far up the tree? But also, we shouldn't just accept the possibility that actually we'll leave the project manager to kind of do all of the work, but you can put my name on the form as the sponsor, and then you can kind of wield it around because I'm really senior in the organization, because that'll make people do things. The role of the sponsor in an organization absolutely needs to be able to make decisions and to actually drive and direct the project for that organization. We also have sponsors who don't understand the role of the sponsor. So, and we always find this kind of, it's quite a difficult position to be in. So I'm a senior manager in an organization. I have excelled in my role and my operational role. It becomes quite difficult then to hold your hand up and say, you've just made me a sponsor, but I don't know what to do. I don't really know what's involved. Quite difficult for them to kind of stand up and do. And so sometimes they really don't understand what that role is. And we can do some training, some coaching and mentoring. But sometimes perhaps we're introducing some new kind of technology, and perhaps they don't know that level of detail because it is completely brand new to them. And so there's a couple of things that we would do in this position is about having a project sponsor delegate, as referred to in the book, or kind of bringing somebody in as a role to actually work as the professional sponsor for that particular project. Anybody use this concept of a sponsor delegate? So in some organizations, we've worked with having senior responsible officers and then what we would call the jobbing sponsor, who does the job for the sponsor on a day-to-day basis. Yes. So the sponsor actually they delegate their sponsorship role to somebody who works directly for them to do it on their behalf. Anybody see any challenges with that sponsor delegate role? It's an interesting role, and there are some organizations where actually people are employed and do that as their full-time job. Their job is to be a sponsor. I was doing some delivery yesterday, and I had the head sponsor from a couple of different regions of their organization. Anybody see any challenges with having that kind of that sponsor delegate role? So we've got Ed there, you've got kind of a proxy, yes, their deputy. Everybody just say that as an issue. So it is quite a challenging one in terms of being clear about where accountability sits for certain decisions in where we've got kind of the sponsor and a sponsor delegate role. So we've got this potential kind of misalignment. And I think we have to just be very clear and understand where the accountability stops and what they have decisions over and what the tolerances are they need to work within and what gets escalated back up to essentially that SRO or the owner, the business owner. So that's a bit about projects. Programs are a really interesting element in terms of sponsorship, because programs may well go across multiple departments within the organization. And again, I did some work. Where's Garrett? Garrett, this is our other trainer who's arrived, so feel free to ask him some questions as well. The interesting thing about kind of program accountability is it kind of sits across potentially multiple departments of the organization. And again, I did some work with an organization that says, we want you to come in and speak to our senior management, Eileen, because I don't think they understand programs. Project accountability, project sponsorship, they seem kind of well versed in, and they deliver the benefits to the organization and everything's fine. Once we put them on a program, then actually we just find they're not delivering the benefits at all. And there's a real challenge then, because when I went and actually spoke to the senior management, it wasn't that they didn't understand programs. It was because they were only being held accountable for the delivery of benefits into their department. So going back to that kind of alignment of kind of business ownership and project and program ownership, they weren't being held accountable for the delivery of the benefits in the other parts of the organization. So when we're starting to think about putting this principle in place, we need to think about, well, how do we hold people accountable at a program sponsor level in terms of being that benefits that sit across the rest of the organization. And we did have to look at reward and recognition in the organization as well, that says once we're getting up above a certain level, we have accountability not just to have our own individual department, but actually we have some accountability for supporting the rest of the organization being successful as well. So we started making them kind of jointly accountable for the overall organization success. And some of you might have the same in your organization, where when you get to your kind of annual performance appraisal and hopefully kind of some kind of reward increase, you might get some for your own individual performance, but you also might get rewarded for organization or company performance. And again, what we're trying to do is saying if we need to kind of have this alignment between what we're held accountable for from an organizational perspective and what we're actually been sponsoring in the projects and programs. So typically when we're looking at a kind of a program sponsorship, we kind of go back to looking at kind of capability and capacity again, but also we want somebody who has perhaps the broadest accountability for the scope of the program and which areas of the organization they're going to impact primarily. The other thing, and they're covered off in some of the other principles, is potentially understanding kind of what the makeup of the program board is. So what you've got within that kind of program board is accountability from all of the areas that are going to be addressed in that program. So again, the program board and program board members have defined accountability to understand their role in contributing to program and project success. But again, then we have an extra level of complexity where we've got programs that have got input from various different organizations. Anybody work with partner organizations when we're delivering a program? Yeah, where we may have it may be kind of a big supply chain where we've got a vested interest. It may be we're working on a joint venture with an organization. And again, what we don't want is multiple sponsors. And that goes back to kind of principle one. We don't want multiple sponsors looking after a project and program, but actually just being very clear in how we establish that single SRO, that single senior responsible owner for that program, what their relationship with those other interested parties who are going to be some of the benefits owners within their own organization. And we'll talk through some real life examples. I am just kind of very conscious of the time that we've got. So that's again, as Ed's kind of mentioned, they not untypical to be working in partnership with kind of governing bodies when we're developing a program. So what we sometimes also do is to create a particular, we call it kind of a delivery agent or a delivery vehicle for saying this is being set up in order to deliver a particular output or product within that particular program. So the idea is that the initiative actually doesn't kind of sit with that delivery agent, but it's actually kind of managed as a separate program. So we do talk about kind of how we would set up that special purpose vehicle. When of course we're not talking about kind of an actual vehicle, but an organization structure that allows us to deliver the program across those multiple organizations. So Garrett's just kind of put a comment there in chat in terms of when we deliver the pilot course, looking at kind of where business changed and making sure we've got the right sponsors in place. So kind of we look at kind of how we set up this kind of legal entity for a special particular programs join, and I've been involved in a number of them, and if they're not articulated carefully, if we've not got the governance carefully defined, people make decisions from one part of the or one organization that has a disproportional impact on the other organization, and it can lead to less than fruitful and beneficial outcomes for both organizations. And I think one of the interesting ones in producing these special purpose vehicles is one of Stephen Covey's principles about there's no such thing as win-lose or lose-win. Either it's a win-win situation and you both win, or it's lose-lose. And the idea is that you'll come out of that with a fruitful relationship that will allow you to work again with that organization. We shouldn't just be kind of putting in place something that kind of destroys those relationships. So going back to kind of what the implications are of this principle then is making sure that whoever is accountable from a sponsoring perspective, they take real ownership of the business case. Okay, and that's like it's been in every textbook since day dot. Yes, the sponsor owns the business case and the project manager owns the project management plan or the execution plan for that particular project. Anybody in their organizations have sponsors who sit there and do all of the detail in their business case, pull that all together? Or is it more likely to be, oh, you've got, yes, Jenny's got a nodding. She's got sponsors who actually kind of pull that together, which is a great position to be in. Mike, we've definitely got the shakes of the head. See the joys of having kind of cameras on. Yes. And in lots of organizations, we still have the project manager who pulls the business case together. Now, I don't mind the project manager pulling the business case together, but what we must have is the project sponsor who kind of takes ownership for that business case. So we've got here that have to kind of approve that business case. Now, again, when we've spent time looking at kind of sponsor roles, one of the things we've said is whatever investment committee or approvals group, projects approvals group, whatever the name is of that body who approves the funding for the project, we get the sponsor to do the presentation. And they say the sponsor's going, yeah, but it's the project manager who's pulled it all together. And we say, if you're going to truly sponsor the project, you should be able to talk through what's in the business case. You need to understand why the project's taking place, why investment is required, how much investment is required, and what difference it's going to make when the project has been delivered. So even if the project manager has pulled all of that together, the project sponsor needs to be able to kind of walk through that to approve that business case and then make sure that we've got the funding for that. So this really starts getting the sponsor involved in recognizing what's going to be required in order to deliver the project. And again, one of the things we often talk about is that conversation between the project manager and the project sponsor that says, if you want me to deliver this business case, then actually this is what I need from you as a project sponsor to get involved. And it isn't just a case of right at the very beginning, it's actually as we go through the whole cycle, the whole kind of life cycle of the project when it's been agreed and updated. So whenever we've got some changes approved, whether we're at a stage gate and we're reviewing the project business case again, they also need to be involved in those conversations. They need to be clear about how the budget is being allocated for the tasks and activities that have been taking place in the project, and be comfortable that it's been looked after and appropriately and spent appropriately by the project and the project team. So again, it's not just a kind of a one-off ownership, it's ongoing. So I'm very conscious we're about to hit 12 o'clock. I have literally only kind of scraped the surface of Principle 3. There's obviously kind of lots more discussion, but I just wanted to give you and demonstrate the kind of the level of detail we go into. So yes, it's great seeing kind of the 10 principles, but there's actually kind of quite a few implications in terms of from us as a PMO when we're trying to implement this principle in terms of our role, how we influence the role of the sponsor, our relationship with business as usual, and the services that we go on to support this particular governance principle. So apologize, that was all felt all a bit rushed. Over 2 days, we've got a little bit more time to do it in a bit more leisurely place, to get more conversations, and also to do some exercises around that. In the absence of too much time, has anybody got any final questions about this principles or about the course as a whole? No? Well, I hope that's given you a flavour of the course. Our next course is scheduled for the 6th to the 7th of December. The pilot course was a little bit cheaper. We've now kind of got this established in our schedule. So it'll be a 11.50 to do the course. That includes a copy of the ebook, but also includes your exam as well. So that's all inclusive. If you wanted a little bit of training before that, our course schedule for the next month is lined up. We've got a PMO Managers course starting this week. We've got the P3O Practitioner course, followed by the Essentials for Analysts. And the flip side of governance, we've got the Governance course at the beginning of November. This is our public schedule. If anybody's interested in running an in-house course where we can make it even more specific to the challenges of your organization, you can have a kind of wider set of rules for those conversations. Please get in touch and we can do that internally. We're also very conscious that people who come on these courses are really kind of inspired by what they can do in their organizations, but might struggle to do it. So we offer two types of support for that. First is we can actually kind of come and work with you in your organizations and kind of help your organization implement that. Or if you want some support kind of behind the scenes, we also do one-to-one coaching. So if you're a PMO manager or even a kind of a sponsor and you want some support establishing governance in your organization, we can do that on a one-to-one basis. So Charles is on the call. He'll also kind of be getting in touch if there's anything we can do. Please get in touch.